Good morning, everyone. It's a great room, great turnout. Can everyone hear me okay? Also in the back? Perfect. All right, good morning. On behalf of the World Affairs Council of Miami, it is a great pleasure to welcome you to this special edition of the Samuelian Distinguished Speaker Series featuring U.S. Special Envoy for Latin America, Mauricio Claver-Carone. Thank you, Mauricio, for joining us. My name is Rosen. I have the pleasure to serve as president and founder of the World Affairs Council of Miami. We are honored to be hosting today's conversation here at Miami-Dade College, Wolfson campus, in partnership with Miami-Dade College Honors College. A big thank you to both these institutions for the continued collaboration and confidence they have in us. For those joining us for the first time, the World Affairs Council of Miami is our community's premier, independent, and nonpartisan 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to engaging Miami on global issues. We convene leaders, experts, and policymakers to discuss international affairs with the goal of enhancing local access to high-quality information on today's world. Put plainly, we serve to inform. We do not take institutional positions, nor do we advocate for or against any policies. Our goal is to empower you with information. We believe that an informed and engaged public is essential for a thriving democracy and a globally connected community. Through programs like this, we bring the world to Miami, helping our community further develop into a hub for policy dialogue, civic engagement, well-being, and prosperity. Today's event is part of the Samuelian Distinguished Speaker Series program, named in honor of a visionary leader who is deeply committed to his community. This series serves as a platform for thought-provoking dialogues with world leaders, diplomats, and experts, offering unique insights into the forces shaping our world. So, why is today's conversation on U.S. strategy toward Latin America important? Well, Latin America is not just our neighbor. It is our strategic, economic, and cultural partner. The region's ups and downs, trends, and ties are fundamentally linked to our fate here in the United States, particularly here in Miami, a city uniquely positioned to play a central role in the affairs of the Western Hemisphere. Following the choice of the American voter last year, the second Trump administration has taken office and is now developing its foreign policy toward Latin America. Key questions remain. Among others, how will this government address antagonistic states, such as Venezuela and Cuba? What approach will the administration take toward economic empowerment, transnational crime, and migration, as well as broader regional security? And, perhaps most importantly, in the grand scheme of things, how will the U.S. position itself amid rising great power competition with China in the Americas? We're fortunate to be joined today by somebody who, through prior experience in the first Trump administration and his current role as Special Envoy for Latin America in the second, is uniquely positioned to help us understand recent developments in U.S. strategy in the Americas. Perhaps more importantly, he can also help us understand the policy behind the headlines, and these days there are many headlines. We know that policy and politics can easily become heated. It is, after all, human to become emotional when the stakes are high, and they are certainly high these days. However, I'd also like to remind people that it is human as well to be respectful, to listen patiently, and to exchange ideas freely. There is a great quote misattributed to Aristotle, which says, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain an idea without accepting it." I therefore ask everyone today to please keep it civil and polite. We will have time at the end for audience Q&A. Mauricio is giving us a lot of time at the end to engage with the audience, so we will get to your questions. When we do, we ask that you keep those questions in the form of a question to keep it engaged, precise, and respectful. One last thing. Now and in the future, the World Affairs Council of Miami is committed to offering these programs cost-free for community learning. Events like this are possible because of the generous support of our members, donors, and partners, without whom we wouldn't be here. On your seats, and also on your seats here, you will find a QR code that will allow you to make a donation if you so choose. By doing so, you help us bring more leaders, experts, and international voices to Miami, and you support initiatives that engage students, professionals, and civic leaders in conversations that shape our future. Thank you for your consideration and for your continued support. Turning back to today's conversation, I will have the distinct pleasure of serving as our moderator, but before I do, I'd like to turn the mic over to Dr. Beatriz Gonzalez, President of Miami-Dade College Wolfson campus, who will share some of her own words of welcome. Please join the stage. Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Miami-Dade College, the wonderful Wolfson campus, here at the heart of it all in downtown Miami. As Aaron said, this is such an important conversation for all of the United States, but particularly for us here in South Florida, where there is such impact and interaction with Latin America, whether it be business or banking or culture, and that goes on and on. So we're so grateful for the partnership, and we're grateful for Special Envoy to be here today for this conversation. We understand you just rushed from the airport. And normally I would say maybe you got to de-stress a little bit in the car, but I don't think that happens in Miami anymore in the car. You're not de-stressing. I have said before that as a community college, we are of and for the community. So it is our role to gather people for important conversations such as this. Conversations that can be held with intelligence and grace, and so that we can really absorb and think and then ask each other questions and engage further. I'd like to thank you for honoring our students who are here today in different places, who are also here to learn. And it's always great to see students participate and faculty who are also gathered here today. So I know that this morning we will do exactly what I just said, hear an interesting conversation with intelligence and grace, and I'm grateful to be able to do that with you today. So thank you again for being here, and now I am honored to introduce a student who was just elected student government president for Wolfson campus, Sophia Carroll, to introduce our speaker.
Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez, for those words of support and leadership. I'm Sophia Carroll, and I have the honor of being the student government president-elect here at Wolfson campus, and also a delegate at our Model United Nations team. And today I have the privilege of introducing our speaker and moderator. But before I do, I would like to offer some words about why I participate in student government, Model United Nations, and attend events like these hosted by the World Affairs Council. I believe that politics, government, and international relations impact each of our lives, even if those impacts are not easily visible. These things impact the prices we see in the stores, the jobs that we have, opportunities, and so many other aspects of our everyday life. That's why I think it is crucial that students participate in the student government, in Model United Nations, in international affairs, and come to these type of events to learn more about the decisions that shape our future. It is therefore my pleasure to participate in today's program and offer a few words to introduce the U.S. Special Envoy, Claver-Carone, and Miami World Affairs Council President, Aaron Rosen. Claver-Carone currently serves as U.S. Special Envoy for Latin America. He is the former president of the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB, elected in September 2020 as the first U.S. citizen to hold the role. In this capacity, he chaired the board of executive directors of the IDB, which is the bank's private sector arm, and chaired the donors committee of the IDB Lab, which fosters innovative development projects. His tenure focused on expanding private sector engagement, strengthening economic recovery initiatives in Latin America and the Caribbean, and modernizing the bank's operational strategies. Prior to leading the IDB, Claver-Carone served as Deputy Assistant to the U.S. President Donald Trump and Senior Director for the Western Hemisphere Affairs at the National Security Council, where he was a key architect of the American CRECE initiative to enhance regional energy and infrastructure investment. Previously, he was the U.S. Executive Director of the International Monetary Fund, shaping policy on debt transparency, trade, and financial stability. He also served as Senior Advisor of the International Affairs at the U.S. Department of Treasury and held academic and advocacy roles, including as Executive Director of Cuba Democracy Advocates. Claver-Carone holds degrees from Rollins College, the Catholic University of America, and Georgetown University Law Center, and he is fluent in Spanish and English. Now to our moderator, Aaron Rosen. Aaron Rosen serves as the president and founder of the World Affairs Council of Miami, where he is responsible for standing up and running the council, including setting its mission and executing its programs. Prior to returning home to South Florida, Aaron was based in Moscow, where he researched international technology policy and Russian affairs with the Alpha Fellowship Program. He previously worked as a Washington, D.C.-based U.S. foreign policy specialist for Japan's MUFG Bank and completed a transatlantic affairs fellowship with the European Parliament in Brussels. Aaron has experience in comparative politics with key legislative and diplomatic bodies, including the U.S. Congress, the German Bundestag, Australian House of Representatives, Canadian House of Commons, Luxembourg Chamber of Deputies, Embassy of Mexico in the United States, and the European Parliament Liaison Office to the U.S. Congress. He is a 2024 Eisenhower Fellow and a term member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Aaron earned a dual master's in U.S. Foreign Policy and Global History from George Washington University and London School of Economics, and holds a bachelor's in International Relations and Comparative Politics from the University of Central Florida. Aaron was born in Southern Carolina and raised in South Florida. He also speaks German, Spanish, and intermediate Russian. Please give a warm welcome to Aaron Rosen and our Claver-Carone.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. And I was born in California, not Carolina, but otherwise it was perfect. I may have included that. That was on me. I may have included that as a typo. No problem. Very nice to see you all today. Thank you very much for the support. Thank you, President. We see that you just joined as well. Thank you very much for hosting us here. We appreciate it. We'll dive right into it. Mauricio, you grew up with family here in South Florida. You're local to the area, both Central Florida and South Florida. You know our community, you know Florida, you know how important Latin America is for our community, and you've seen that importance only grow over time. At the same time, you know Washington, and you know that there's been a saying for years in Washington, which is that the U.S. doesn't really care about Latin America. What's meant by that is that relative to the importance of places like East Asia, the Middle East, or Russia, the U.S. has paid insufficient attention to policy in Latin America. That, however, appears to have changed. My first question concerns why. Why now? You served in the first Trump administration helping to guide strategy and policy toward Latin America from inside the White House National Security Council. In the second, and congratulations on your new role, you serve as special envoy to the region. Help us understand what distinguishes the second Trump administration's Latin America policy from the first, and what motivates this feeling I described, whether accurate or perceived, that Latin America is now finally a top strategic priority for the United States.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for the great turnout, and it's great to be here at Miami-Dade Community College. Before I start, I want to recognize two very important people. Everybody's important, but two important people that I work with. One that I saw, but now I don't see her, Viviana Bovo, who's here. Oh, there she is. So Viviana is the senior advisor for Western Hemisphere Affairs to our great Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Has been with him for a very long time, and we're glad to have her here. And then our incoming ambassador, important for Miami-Dade already, obviously, as a commissioner, but our incoming ambassador who just got out of committee, our new ambassador to Panama, Kevin Cabrera, and welcome. And he's got a tough job. He's got a tough job, but he has got. But there could not be anyone better to do that, and he's going to be a great leader there. So, thank you both for two more important people than me. So you can you ask them any questions. So, look, first and foremost, at the end of the day, people really kind of underestimated or speculated or didn't understand just how much President Trump was focused, even the first term, in regards to the Western Hemisphere. The president always saw faraway conflicts. Oh, let me wait, one more thing before I start. And to the students, that's the most important part here. You guys are, welcome. If you agree with me, great. If you disagree with me, one day you're gonna be up here. So think about that and don't give me too much crap because I don't want anybody to give you crap in that regards. But one day you'll be up here, so start, what's the word? there's a great word that you start thinking about something and you start visualizing, whatever. Anyway, manifesting, yes, yes. So, look, during the first term, the president was always very focused in regards to, he understood the importance that everything that affects Americans, everybody sitting in this room, everybody sitting in a room in Iowa, what affects them on a daily basis, whether it's from a security perspective, from a migration perspective, from an economic perspective, is the Western Hemisphere. He would see these faraway conflicts, whether it's in the Middle East and Asia, and he would just be like, this is so far, we're spending so much money dealing with these conflicts so far away, and yet, what about here? For me, one of the most striking moments in the first Trump administration, when I was at the White House at National Security Council, and it was 2019, which many of you remember was kind of peak in regards to our policy towards Venezuela, and at that point what became, maximum pressure strategy there with the interim government of Juan Guaido, et cetera. And at that time, there was a lot of, it was a lot of convulsion. There was a time of a lot of movement, and a lot of things were happening. We asked and we sought, okay, what type of, for whether it's counter-narcotics activities in regards to Venezuela, but for other security measures, et cetera, what is our military presence in regards to naval vessels in the Caribbean? There was a particular time, date, et cetera. We won't get into those details. But we wanted to know what was the presence that we had of naval assets nearby. And literally the answer was none. Oh, there's a Dutch naval frigate that's there by Curacao. And you're like, what? And the president blew his mind. All of our naval assets were in the Persian Gulf, in the Mediterranean, the South China Sea, and we literally had no naval assets right here in the Western Hemisphere protecting our coastlines. Now, granted, we live in a safe neighborhood, quote unquote. But at the end of the day, that was just shocking. That was shocking. Later on, moving past Venezuela, and it had a lot to do with Venezuela, we did in 2020, we had a counter-narcotics surge. And it was the first time that we used Department of Defense assets in a long time, in decades, for countering narcotics activities. By the way, that sounds like, why not? But for a long time, the Department of Defense, and actually even people in the previous first Trump administration, did not want the Department of Defense to use its assets and its time for counter-narcotics activities. They did not believe the Defense Department should be involved in drug interdiction. They didn't want to put money for it. They didn't want to help with the financing on joint DEA operations, et cetera. They thought that was not the role of the Department of Defense. But yet, we went out there, we had this surge, it was March of 2020, and we brought, for the first time in decades, naval cruisers, naval-like assets to actually interdict. And we interdicted more narcotics in 1 month. It's like 250 tons. It was something ridiculous than we had in years. Why? Because we had the assets there to stop them. I mean, our law enforcement does a heroic job, and our intel community does a heroic job every day tracking flows of narcotics to the United States. But we don't always have the assets, and our Coast Guard is heroic. But we don't always have the assets to stop it all. Like, that's how crazy it is. Like, when we talk about like an invasion of like drugs and all this stuff, like, it's true, like, but we didn't have the assets here because our assets were in the Persian Gulf. Our assets were in the Mediterranean. Our assets were in the South China Sea. And for the president was like, but guess what? That drug on that ship is what's going to kill one of your family members, or can kill one of your family members, or a friend, or a loved one. That's what's hurting our communities. And yet we can't dedicate resources and assets to stopping that, which is a direct threat to Americans, as opposed to these more indirect geopolitical threats abroad. Either we walk or chew gum, or if we have to choose, we have to save Americans first and foremost. And that's the president's mentality. Americans come first. All of you come first. Protecting our borders come first. Ensuring our borders are secure comes first. Countering narcotics comes first. Countering terrorist organizations right here, whether it's the Tren de Aragua, whether it's MS-13, whether it's the Sinaloa cartel, whether it's any of those drug cartels, that comes first. And that's the mentality always the presidents had. Now, that took a while in the first Trump administration because it took a while for the first Trump administration to kind of settle into where it was. I'm happy to say that by the time I got to the White House, by the second year, we started on that track, and I think the goal now, throughout the transition, was let's start day one where we left off last time. Now, granted, COVID was, completely kind of absorbed all of our attention and created opportunities also. By the way, in a very tragic way, it validated the concerns that the president always had, whether it was on the security front, in regards to migration, et cetera, or on the economic front, in regards to our over-reliance on supply chains towards Asia or with countries that at the end of the day are not so friendly to us, which then leads us to today. And let me just start off, obviously, because this is what's on the news, right? And everybody's seeing what's on the news this morning, Look, today is a great day for America. And it's a great day for the Americas. If there's any takeaway that you saw as you're looking at the tables yesterday, or better than the tables, if you're looking through the annexes, if you have nothing to do and you want to look at the 400 pages of USTR Annex this morning, which is a fun job, what you'll see is that the Americas came out winning. We have a global 10% rate, which pretty much covers all of the Americas, with a few anomalies. One of the anomalies is Nicaragua, rightfully so, which is at 30%. The chart says 18, but it's actually 30% if you look at the annex because it covers other aspects. The size could be triple the rate. Good. And then you have some other anomalies, obviously Venezuela, but we don't really import much in that sense. And then you have Guyana, which there are exemptions on energy, and that one's just complicated, and it's not all that it appears, because at the end of the day, there are exemptions on the energy front, and the Guyana dynamic is a very specific energy-related one. But you look across the way to Asia, and you got now, in totality, 54% for China. You got 40s across Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Asia, etc. Southeast Asia, you have Japan, Korea in the 20s and 30s. So Asia now, Southeast Asia, has, between China and Southeast Asia, has 2, 3, 4, up to 5 times the tariff rates that the Americas have. Now, as an investor, and I am also an investor in Latin America, as an investor, if you're an investor in Latin America, today's a pretty good day. Latin America has always been the laggard of emerging markets. And today, if you're an emerging markets investor, you're like, hey, that might be where I want to focus in. Now, if you're an investor in the United States of America, you're having an amazing day. You're in the right place. But if you're an investor in the Americas, you're in a good place. If you're an investor in Asia, you're having a rough morning. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you that this is a very thoughtful exercise on reshoring and the reindustrialization of America, which is where the president's head is and what the president's priority is. He said it in his inauguration speech. It's the golden age of America. He hearkened back to McKinley, the reindustrialization of America, the non-imperialistic acquisition of strategic assets throughout the region, hence why he talks so much about the Panama Canal. we are now reliving this era, and the Americas are going to be the winner. It's a great day for America. It's a great day for the Americas in that sense.
Thank you, Mauricio. There's a few things there that I want to dive into more in greater detail, but before I do, I want to jump on something that more specifically concerns, translating sort of Trump's thinking into policy. You gave an interview recently with the Miami Herald in which you said that the worst thing a government can be is predictable. President Trump is known for bold and often unscripted, at least from the public's perception, declarations. Yet in every government, of course, there are, behind remarks, there are always complex policy considerations. Having served and continuing to serve as a key figure in Trump's Latin America team, and you've been described as someone uniquely capable of, quote, translating Trump to the public, right, and to external audiences. Can you walk us through how your experience working closely with the president enables you to turn statements into specific policy, and maybe more importantly, policy successes, and then on unpredictability, while that can certainly help in negotiation, does it risk harming business confidence in long-term planning?
So it's actually a really simple formula, and Kevin can tell you this politically, but I can tell you this from a policy point. I think Americans this is very sad. I mean, it's actually like a sad reflection. I look back at both Republican and Democratic presidents throughout my whole life. It's like, I feel, and this morning I was kind of thinking this over, I think Americans like being lied to. Or they're so used to being lied to that they almost expect it. And the difference about President Trump is that if he says something in public, it's what he says in private, and vice versa. This morning I kept hearing, everyone was just like, whoa, we knew he was going to do tariffs, but really? That's what he was going to do? He said he was going to do it. When he says, I'm going to shut down the border, he's going to do it. Here, this is kind of very timely here in South Florida. We've literally spent a month and a half speculating, and every journalist was writing about, where's Trump's policy towards Venezuela going? What does he feel? Is it going to be a rapprochement? Or is he... Listen to him. How many times did he have to say in November and December and January, I don't want Venezuelan oil. We don't need it. We have all the oil we need right here. This is about America, the United States producing oil. We don't need Venezuelan oil. We don't want their oil. But yet everybody thought, oh, no. He's going to cut a deal for oil. And then I was surprised. Oh my God, he pulled the licenses. He said it. So it's not difficult translating what the intention is because it's pretty much what he says. He's pretty clear on it. Now, how does he turn that into policy? Well, the way you turn that into policy is essentially, first and foremost, learning the lessons of the first Trump administration, which is overcoming the obstacles and challenges. Unfortunately, we spent over 2 years in the first Trump administration literally having the entire government, the Fed, full of fine career servants. There's great, wonderful people. But I almost felt like they thought, they were under the same spell that all Americans have been for decades with politicians lying to them. It's like, oh no, he can't mean that. No, we can't do that. That defies conventional wisdom. Embassies in Jerusalem? No, that defies conventional wisdom. We're going to start a war in the Middle East. If we move embassies to Jerusalem, there's going to be a war in the Middle East. The brightest foreign policy minds of every think tank in Washington, of every senior State Department, intellectual, whatever, was like, you're going to start a war in the Middle East. Not only didn't we start a war in the Middle East, but we actually engaged in the most comprehensive historic initiative towards peace in the history of the Middle East, in the Abraham Accord. Oh, no. You can't do Title III, Helms-Burton. Oh my God, you're going to flood the court systems. The courts are going to shut down. Miami courts, you're not going to be able to prosecute federal crimes because everybody's going to be filing for claims for their properties in Cuba. The republic is still standing. The court system is doing just fine. And it's all settled down. And it wasn't a flood or a wave. It was, and by the way, we literally spent 25 years of Republican and Democratic presidents saying you can't do that. No, you can't do that. And it's a violation of international law. Then Canada and the Europeans are going to come, and there's going to be taxes, and they're going to come, and it's going to be reciprocal, and we're going to start a trade war, and the world's going to end. Unconventional wisdom. Wow. Today, everything will settle. And by the way, I think one of the coolest things of today, these are the same geniuses. They're like, no. Bringing China into the global trading system is going to have an overwhelming democratizing effect. We need to bring them into the World Trade Organization because then they're really going to abide by the rules. They're going to play by the rules. It's going to be great. So let's go into this global trading system whereby we, the United States, and all of you taxpayers, and all of us, become the most generous country in the world, the most open and generous. Let's lower our trade barriers. We don't tariff anybody. Everybody can bring in whatever the hell they want. And then everybody else can punish us. That's okay. You can tariff us, but we can't tariff you. And don't be mean. And that is going to make China become a democratic country or something in that sense. Instead, we financed the growth of the most lucrative authoritarian state in modern history. And as a result now of the biggest direct competitive threat to the United States of our time, funded by everybody in this room. Well, that was genius. So now, and by the way, China is more authoritarian and more dangerous. And look, I lived this in the Inter-American Development Bank. Like the reason the reason we had the crazy idea of like, okay, we're a 30% shareholder in Inter-American Development Bank, so let's go in there and try to influence for U.S. investments in U.S. No, because in 2008, 2009, China, in a very non-transparent way, bought itself into the Inter-American Development Bank, and literally every story you read today about Chinese infrastructure and other investment in Latin America was co-financed by the Inter-American Development Bank, 99 projects, including right now, by the way, being dispersed this month, the metro in Bogota, with Chinese money, was co-financed by the Inter-American Development Bank with your taxpayer money. So each of you have co-financed every IDB co-financed investment project by the Chinese in Latin America. Brilliant. Brilliant. So then President Trump comes in and says, this is all stupid. Because common sense dictates it's all stupid. So let's realign this conventional wisdom, and let's realign it to the favor of all of you Americans, all of us Americans, and put America first, and the Americas as a secondary benefit to that, and the rest of the world, you either play fairly or you don't play. And by the way, I will predict that this, for all the talk of free trade throughout the 90s and the early 2000s, et cetera, for all of that talk, what we're seeing today, I predict, will lead to the greatest incentive momentum towards actual free trade, which means 0 to 0, I don't charge you, you don't charge me, that we've ever seen despite the rhetoric of the last 20, 30 years. Just this morning, you're waking up to news of suddenly India woke up and said, wow, maybe this hasn't been fair. Maybe we shouldn't be charging you, 30, 40, 50, 60% tariffs while you don't charge us. So let's reconsider that. Vietnam is saying, wow, suddenly woke up this morning, maybe this isn't fair. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Our friend, partner, ally, who we love, Israel, suddenly said, oh, wow, maybe this isn't fair. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Friends and not friends alike suddenly have just had this April 2nd renaissance of like, wow, maybe I am charging you more than you're charging me, which goes to the Panama Canal. Like, why is the president pissed off? Because we're getting ripped off. Obviously, there's the history. Like, there's the history of the canal and everything we did, built by the United States. We all know that. And I'm not here to relitigate history. I'm going to talk about right now. Right now, you basically have an asset which, when in the last 10 years, when the government of Varela went in, recognized the People's Republic of China, and literally started handing off assets left and right to the Chinese government, where under our treaty obligation, we are supposed to protect it. But let's talk about the economic side. You have an asset that was literally diminishing because at the end of the day, our global trade was expanding, ships were bigger, better infrastructure was needed, et cetera. So the traffic was dwindling. Like literally the Panama Canal by 2005, 2007 was going to go out of business. Like, because it was just, at that point, the ships and everything were so big, it was just better to just go to the coast of California and train things across. Or go directly wrong. Because of that fear of being left out, the second set of locks to expand the canal was added. Okay, great. So now you can move back bigger ships, et cetera. At the end of the day, geopolitically, the goal of this, of course, should be more volume, right? We want more ships to go by to facilitate global trade. Instead, it was less ships, higher prices. I understand, supply and demand, it is what it is, but also you can get to the revenue side one way or another. And why was it less ships, more money? Because of inefficiencies. Infrastructure inefficiencies, it's not, I promise you, it's not global warming, right? Like before the droughts, before anything, the infrastructure for the water levels was there. They've been asking the Army Corps of Engineers forever to go check this out, to help out, to invest, et cetera, which we're willing to do, but we're not going to do it for free. You want the Army Corps of Engineers to go deal with the water levels, to go deal with the infrastructure of the Panama Canal? 100%. Let's make a deal. Let's make a revenue sharing agreement. Let's go in a joint venture with the government of Panama to say, hey, we're going to run this thing together and we're going to fix all of these infrastructure problems. Now, what we're not going to do is that we're your biggest client. So, 75% of your commerce, of the reason people pass through here is to come to us or to go through us or from us, and you're literally just going to be charging us exorbitant fees. And by the way, to the point that even what was the advantage, so like in when the height of natural gas and the export of natural gas from Texas was at its peak, then it was like, yeah, let's move it. The Panama Canal is going to be hugely important. There are inefficiencies, and by the way, at that point, about 70, 80% of our natural gas exports to Asia were going through the Panama Canal. It became so inefficient that by last year, it's less than 15%. Because natural gas exporters were just like, screw it, I'm just going to go around. It's just not worth it. So what's the point? What's the point? So like, at the end of the day, we don't like getting ripped off. Now, I think Panamanians are great allies. We want to work with them. And at the end of the day, we want them to be successful because at the end of the day, a well-functioning, highly efficient canal is going to be good for everybody. Everybody. And they're going to make money from it, and we can help them, but we're not going to do it for free. Because at the end of the day, they're not even letting our naval assets go through for free, right? Like, we get nothing for free. But yet everybody wants us to do stuff for free. We don't get a lot of credit on a lot of these things, man. You know, the whole, sometimes you got to break conventional wisdom, right? So like USAID, you know, I mean, how many times have you guys heard the story that, oh, the United States, we don't do anything. Oh, no, we don't have a presence anymore in the region because China is everywhere. They're doing everything, you know, et cetera. U.S. is not present. When we literally went through sometimes you got to break it to build it back better. I can't believe I just said that. Not in that sense, politically build that, but to actually build something. But like, you got to break it. And, you know, and we had to go in there. USAID in Latin America had 1,000 programs. 1,000 programs. Now, a ton of them were crap. A ton of them were useless, etc. But if you would have asked anybody here a year ago, what is the U.S. government, through its bilateral development agencies, doing in Latin America? They're like, nothing. Nothing. The Chinese are everywhere. But we're not doing anything. 1,000 programs. We don't get credit for it. It's like, but by the way, but now that when you dismantle it, and you gotta be like, okay, let's figure out what is worth it and what is not, what works and what doesn't. Let's do this in an efficient manner that measures the foreign policy impact. Then suddenly every country is realizing, oh my God, this program was so amazing. Thank you, United States. This is great. Sometimes you gotta take something for people to appreciate it. And suddenly it's, wow, these are really great programs. They're super effective. Please don't take this away. We need this. Oh my God, you're doing this on infrastructure? Oh my God, we didn't know this. This is awesome. So this is all an exercise. And by the way, it's only been 2 months. Just imagine 2 years. You know, it's gonna be a lot of fun. Anyway, I'm sorry, I rambled. By the way, look, McDonald's. This is a great example. I've used this before, but I'm sorry, because I'll get off the Panama Canal kick. This is Kevin inspires me. Like, what does that mean in being ripped off? Like, look, if McDonald's, you know, I was just because I wanted French fries, so that's where my head is at. Like if you're a potato producer in Idaho, right, and like you sell 75% of your potatoes to McDonald's, are you gonna go rip off McDonald's? Or if McDonald's comes in and says, hey, you know, this is a little too expensive. Can you like at least give me a break because I'm your biggest customer. I buy 75% of your crops. Like, give me a good price, right? That's the Panama Canal. It's like, hey, you exist because of our commerce, and yet you charge us like you charge the Chinese and like you charge everybody. Like give us a break. And by the way, we built it and we secure it, supposedly. And like, don't rip us off, man. Anyway, sorry. French fries.
We maybe the ambassador will join us in the future to do a program on U.S.-Panama relations. That will be very interesting. We can do a deeper dive. I want to focus on China for one more second before we look at Cuba and Venezuela and sanctions policy, topics that are particularly relevant for our community here in Miami. For those unfamiliar with the wider context, China is South America's top trading partner, and it's the second only to the U.S. when looking at LATAM as a whole. It's a major source of investment and infrastructure lending, and is increasingly engaged in the region's space sector. Engagement, it claims, is commercial, but of course the U.S. Can view as having a dual military and intelligence use as well. Generally speaking, there have been a lot of concerns, particularly here from great institutions like FIU, that the U.S. hasn't been paying enough attention to China in Latin America. That seems to have changed with the Trump administration. This is certainly a priority. At the same time, the tariffs that you announced on many of our partners in the region, 10% across the board to countries whether we have more positive or more challenging relations with, it was sort of across the board. Those 10% tariffs, I guess the question is, does that risk diverting greater trade engagement with the United States and deepening those countries' trade engagement with China? And specifically on lending and the money that's needed for the region, one of the claims is, a lot of governments in the region may say, we don't particularly love getting closer and closer with China, but there has been insufficient funding coming from the Western traditional sources to help us become rich countries. We want to be rich, we want to be developed, and so we need Chinese money because Western sources have been insufficient. How do we address that? How do we help them develop and reduce their need to orient themselves toward China?
So, since the first Trump administration, kind of China's dynamic in the region has changed substantially. When we first came in the first Trump administration back in 2017, the Chinese relationship with the region was based on kind of threefold. There was a sovereign lending angle, where basically the Chinese sovereign lending institutions, the lenders were essentially providing countries loans, sovereign loans. There's the investment side, whereby obviously they were investing in strategic assets, and there was a time at that point where they were walked by the hands of international institutions like the Inter-American Development Bank, were literally just grabbing and buying assets and throwing money around. And then there's trade, which is then essentially taken advantage of and using it for extortive purposes of different countries and purchasing of whether it's agricultural products, minerals, et cetera. In the first Trump administration, sovereign lending was still through the roof. It was still kind of like the peak period. We had pivoted, and I think, again, this is one of those issues where, against conventional wisdom, President Trump came in the first term and says, hey, we're going to pivot on China. And it was like, whoa. And it was quite a pivot. And here we are now. And then I think there's now a bipartisan issue with bipartisan agreement that was the correct thing to do. On the foreign lending side, on the sovereign lending side, that's pretty much dried up. Already it was kind of down in a downward spiral. The biggest recipient of sovereign loans from China was actually Venezuela, which had somewhere between 50 and 60 billion. Obviously the Chinese in that sense are also, they don't want to lose their money, so they didn't have a good experience there, and it wasn't they were going to throw it away. But then there was countries like Ecuador, Brazil, Suriname, that were caught, Jamaica, that were really caught in the China debt trap in the region. That has literally bottomed out, like completely, to the point that even now today, and then COVID literally just put it to rest. Today obviously China has its own domestic challenges and it doesn't have money to throw away in that regards. Now, how does that then translate to investments? Again, they are not throwing away money throughout the region the way they used to. There was a time that it was just literally, how many assets can I buy, regardless if they were productive or not, and then just let them sit there and just let them, dissipate and distress them, frankly, because it didn't matter. As long as nobody had them, they were happy. As long as the U.S. didn't have them or U.S. investors didn't have them, they were happy. The trade angle is the most challenging angle because there, that's just about purchasing. And there is where we've seen kind of the huge disparity that has taken place over the last years in regards to the agricultural export. For example, the biggest beneficiary of that is Brazil, where most of their, there's a competitive aspect there with us because it's directly competitive with us on soy, wheat, all of those products, and they're purchasing there. And then, of course, then there's the whole minerals and the purchases of minerals, et cetera. Now, and you're correct, there's not a single country in the region, literally, including Venezuela, right, including Nicaragua, that doesn't prefer American investors and doesn't, or at least say they do, want U.S. investors, because we're real, than Chinese investors, which at the end of the day are still very foreign, they're complicated, they don't produce quality, and it's a disaster. I think the biggest impediment towards it, which is something we would like to address now, is just the entire nature of what investment in the region looks like. And I think that has been corrupted, literally, in various ways. It's been corrupted by kind of major companies, particularly in the infrastructure space, like Odebrecht, which its lasting effect in the region and the way they did business has been devastating. including right here in Miami-Dade County, which I remember when I was once a young activist. I took a lot of heat for it, and I was like, this is bad. Turned out to be bad, but including right here in Miami-Dade County. But throughout the region, there's some Aramis and other activists at the time supported our efforts. And that was tough. And then the Chinese filled that gap right away. So it was essentially that blew up. Then the whole notion was, oh my God, that corruption scandal, it then becomes about quantitative versus qualitative measures. So in our processes, et cetera, you have to be the lowest bidder. Then the Chinese came in because, of course, if you went with anything but the lowest bidder, then there was some type of Odebrecht corruption, and you were going to go to jail. So the Chinese came in and said, this is great, because we can always be the lowest bidder. Because the Chinese state-owned entity can go, does a bid, goes for a company, and if they're not the lowest bidder, then the Chinese government will come in and subsidize the company, will make it the lowest bidder, because at the end of the day, they don't care. It's not about making money for them. It's about exerting influence. Well, that's a problem. And then the third problem there is you have a dependency on international financial institutions. So, and again, I've mentioned the Inter-American Development Bank because I saw it firsthand. The World Bank, the local ones, the CAF, GABE, the Caribbean ones, et cetera. And the problem is that they've turned these countries into bad habits and bad instruments that then lead to bad practices. And US investors want opportunities to create value, one, and to bring returns on their investments, two. But what happens if you're one of these countries? If you're one of these countries, you'd rather go, politician, this is non-ideological, of the left or the right. You'd rather go for the Inter-American Development Bank or the World Bank to give you a loan for this infrastructure project, which will be done God knows when, but you don't care because your life cycle as the president is 4 years, so it gives you the hit and you can say you did this. The project will never be finished. By that time, it's a multilateral, so you're paying them off slowly. They're long-term loans. And then suddenly nothing gets done. And it sucks. And then what are the instruments these institutions use? Basically, they lend. So they do these lending instruments, long-term, et cetera. So in that sense, guess what? You don't create value, because at the end of the day, I don't care. I don't care if you finish the project. I don't care if we build this port. As long as I get paid back on my loan at some point in the next 10 years, I don't care if it gets done well. So that's the greatest value killer. So the loan instruments and IFIs are value killers because you're not incentivized for the project to work, to produce, to be top quality. Which then what happens? If you're another US investor, what are you looking for? More value. So if you can't create value, no one's going to come in to add more value and create value, et cetera. So you've literally disincentivized the whole value stream. And then when they realize that, oh God, this is a problem, then in countries that have certain issues, whether it's currency, et cetera, let's do loan guarantees, because that really works. So then if you're a US investor and you're going to go into one of these countries that's laden with these loans, and you're like, oh, I'm going to do a loan guarantee, well, this kills value, this kills returns. Why the hell am I going to go invest in a port facility in Argentina for a 7 to 10% return when I can get 15% in Palm Beach County or in Arizona or whatever? So you're killing all the incentives, right? So we got to break that cycle. And this is where this great era, there's a reason for my story. This is the reason why this era of non-imperial expansionism comes into play. We got to get out of these old institutions with these old methods and these old styles and come back into good old-fashioned equity investments. We need the United States to not only have the instruments of economic statecraft, but to be able to, with our biggest comparative advantage, which is our capital markets, our investors, et cetera, be able to incentivize and find high-quality deals that have good returns, and I promise you, it's kind of going full circle to how we started. Part of the reason that Latin America has been a laggard in emerging markets for all this time is precisely because of those reasons I just gave you. But they'd rather go invest in Southeast Asia. Why? Right? If we create that environment with what's happening in the geopolitical realm right now, that's what we're going to start seeing. And at that point, we're talking about the U.S. having skin in the game. If we have skin in the game in those ports and facilities in Panama, if we have skin in the game in those, in those assets in Mexico, we have skin in the game in those assets in Guyana, we have skin in the game in those assets throughout the region, then the region gets what it wants, which is U.S. investment. We're creating value. We're bringing in more investors with that value. Everybody's making money, getting their returns. And we're expanding our footprint at a time where China's in retreat. Now, the Chinese see this and they know this. So what do? They let assets distress, which to a degree is a good opportunity for investors, but they just let assets distress. And then if an investor wants to come in and grab it because it's just sitting there distressed, they try to intimidate you. They go to the government. They try to intimidate. They extort, et cetera. So that's the cycle we're going to break. I just gave you a visual, a little bit of what America Crece 2.0 will look like in regards to really focusing on having that equity footprint that not only creates value, brings investments to these countries, creates value for all, and reestablishes a U.S. footprint.